Chefs of Reddit, what's your number one useful cooking tip? A master chef told me this in culinary school. You can always stop cooking. Take it off the burner or out of the oven if you need to. Surprisingly helpful tip. He probably meant for you to stop cooking altogether. Learn cooking techniques instead of recipes. Don't approach recipes like they're magic spells in the Harry Potter universe. If you wiggle your nose wrong or put in a speck too much of some seasoning, you're not going to end up with a completely different dish. Alton Brown does an incredible job of teaching a cooking technique and then showing you a recipe that applies that technique. If you learn a process instead of a rote recipe, you will know how to cook dozens of dishes, and it's really the only way to develop skills in the kitchen. Chop with the rear part of the blade, not the tip, in a rolling motion. Control your heat. Control everything, but mostly your heat. My mom will only cook with max heat because it's faster, but it always ended up tasting better than my dad's careful heat management. Then I found out that Chinese food is to be made on high heat always, basically. Roasted garlic. Garlic is cheap and you don't even need a ceramic garlic roaster, although having one in the kitchen looks good. Just slice off the top of the bulbs and cover with a little olive oil, salt and pepper, wrap in tin foil and place in the oven at 350 Fahrenheit for 50-60 minutes. You can add it to sauces, spread on bread, etc. etc. A neat feature of roasted garlic is that over time its chemical composition breaks down into more and more sugar, so any sauce you make with it will become sweeter. I make tomato sauce with it and it's delicious to begin with, but just a few days later it tastes twice as good. Just to piggyback on your excellent point, when a recipe calls for garlic, people need to try adding both raw garlic and roasted garlic. The raw garlic will still have that sharpness and bite when cooked, but the roasted garlic adds an entirely different dimension, a mellow, earthy flavor, and the two complement each other very well. Keep it simple. Something with 3-4 ingredients that go really well together is better than something with 12 ingredients that clash with each other. Pastry chef here. Not my best tip, but the only one I can think of this early on my day off. Flouring pans for cakes is a step not to be skipped, but when it comes to chocolate cakes, it looks awful, so for dark cakes, I use cocoa powder instead. If you have to keep adding salt, try adding some citric acid instead. Don't cook with oil while naked. Rather, don't cook naked if you're going to puss out. A clove of garlic is different than a bulb of garlic. I'm a terrible chef. Add 5 cloves of garlic to the stew. Whoa, that is a ton of garlic. In you go. My co-worker's roommate, adding 5 bulbs whole not peeled into a stew. Heat will remain in your food after turning off the stove and it will continue to cook, so pay attention to your timing. For example, when you want to add cheese to your omelette, cheese should melt in a plate with heat of the eggs, otherwise you will have over-dried omelette, same as overcooked pasta. Not a food tip but a cooking tip. A falling knife has no handle. If you drop a knife, get the heck out of the way and let it hit the floor. Washing it is easy enough. Try to catch it and you could be visiting the emergency room. Not a chef but have worked in a kitchen. Best tip I ever got was for frying eggs. Have it on a medium temp, not roasting hot, and once you've cracked your egg, cover it. Use a pot lid or something. This means your egg cooks from the top and the bottom, so you get a perfect runny yolk without any undercooked white around it. I use this every single time I fry eggs and I've never looked back. If something burns slightly, throw barbecue sauce on it and call it smoked. If something that's supposed to be smooth comes out chunky, call it home style. Or if something comes out a bit sloppier than you expected, you have created a nice wholesome rustic dish. Sharp knives make everything easier. A sharp knife is a safe knife. You can clean while you cook. Mise en place, which is French for cut and measure your crap out ahead of time, saves so much stress. A chef here. Hopefully some of this is helpful. This is general stuff that applies to most people I train or speak to. Don't watch those cooking videos on Facebook. tasty, etc. Or at least don't follow them to a T. They usually don't follow good cooking fundamentals and often overcook their meats, or have weird steps in them that a chef would probably never do. I usually see them and think they are awful. Learn how to properly dice an onion into small and even sized chunks. Raw white onion belongs on way less food than you think it does, especially when it's cut into large uneven chunks. If you want onions on something, try sweating, roasting, caramelizing, or seasoning them with some acid or salt. Having a sharp knife and learning how to do basic cuts is very helpful. Learning to cut fresh herbs finely without damaging them, or cut consistent sizes in meats and vegetables for even cooking can help out the taste quite a bit. Use more salt than you think you need. Don't add it all too early into the cooking stage, but when you are doing your final taste before you serve something, make sure it's seasoned. Use different sizes of salt depending on what you are doing. Typically seared meat is better with coarse salt. Fine salt is best used when you don't want the texture of coarse salt or you are worried it won't incorporate properly into the food. Once you learn to season with salt, then balancing dishes with acid is another good step. Citrus juices, vinegars work well and can really take things to the next level. Taste often, and at every stage of cooking. Make sure you taste it before you serve it. You probably need less garlic than you think, even though it's delicious. The same goes with herbs and spices. When I was starting out, I'd always overdid it. Really good ingredients can speak for themselves. I always try to look at 3 recipes before I cook something new. From there I usually freestyle, but if you're less confident, just pick one. By looking at a few you get a better idea of key ingredients and ratios. If you overcook meat a lot, buy a probe thermometer. You should never overcook meat again. Another meat tip: think of where on the animal the meat came from. If it's a muscle they use a lot, legs, butt, etc., it probably needs low and slow cooking. If it's a muscle they use a little, back, tenderloin, etc., it probably needs high heat and a faster cook time. There are exceptions to that rule, but that works more often than not. Put butter on or in nearly everything. Mount it, add it while swirling or whisking, into a sauce at the end of cooking. Base meat or fish in it. Chefs put butter into way more things than you think. If you are cooking with alcohol, make sure you fully cook out all of the alcohol before adding more liquid. Otherwise the taste will linger on and it can be very overpowering. Timers. I always forget I have something going on the stove while I'm cutting something across the kitchen. Timers save lives. I'm far from a chef, but a decent pan means everything. I was using old pans from Goodwill for the longest time and couldn't understand why everything stuck no matter how much olive oil I used. Got decent pans. Changed my life. Everything cooks more evenly. You can use the stem of broccoli. Just peel, slice and fry it in the pan. It's delicious. This, but also with tops of certain veggies. I've used carrot greens, radish greens, and celery leaves sauteed with butter and salt. They also taste good thrown into salads. Just do a quick Google check to see if it's edible beforehand. When tasting something like soup or sauce, here's a guide to adding herbs and spices. Salt, you can taste instantly. After stirring it in, if it tastes bland, add more. It's not something that cooks off or in much. In a soup or sauce. Black pepper, dry herbs, most other seasonings. After adding more, and don't taste until at least 15 minutes have passed. These ingredients infuse and release over time and you can really overdo it. Beer, wine, alcohol. This varies a lot and in some cases the alcohol should be added way before the other ingredients to simmer with some onions. Anyway, in cases like adding beer to chili, which I do often, again dump in about 6-8 ounces. Close the lid and let it infuse. Don't taste for 20 minutes. If it still tastes alcohol, why after this remove the lid and let it cook off more. Fresh herbs. Add late and as close to serving as possible. In the last 15 minutes of cooking. These are full of flavor and are generally best added near serving time for best flavor. Clean it up as you use it. The longer you leave it, the longer it takes to clean it. Use a food scale, especially if you bake. A cup of something isn't always a cup. A food scale takes the guesswork out. Controlling your heat includes putting a thermometer in your oven. If you're worried about calories, just eat a smaller portion rather than substituting healthier ingredients, especially when baking. People should eat filling veggies instead of going for salads if they want to feel full but lower the calories. Broccoli is a great filling veggie, as are squashes and bok choy. There is also great produce to be found at Asian markets for greater variety, like enoki mushroom, elephant stalk, and watercress. Let knives fall to the floor instead of catching them. Clean as you go. Taste as you cook. Vanilla extract comes out of the bottle really fast. Only cook with wine you would actually drink yourself. This means, don't use cooking wine, as in, that garbage that is all salty from the grocery. Just stick to wines you'd find on the shelf that aren't in the cooking aisle. This does not mean that if you don't like dry, white wines, that you shouldn't cook with them. Just don't use wine that has been doused with seawater. Julia Child says you can use dry vermouth in place of white wine in recipes, which is great if you only need a splash and don't want to open a whole new bottle. I'm not a professional, but I humbly suggest learning about ratios and key ingredients. Ruleman's 20 Techniques 100 Recipes, A Cook's Manifesto and Ratio, the simple codes behind the craft of everyday cooking, both by Michael Ruhlman and available on Amazon, are life-changing. Also, invest in Michael Bittman's How to Cook Everything. It's a primer for beginners and a really great source for experienced chefs cooks to break out of a rut. I often find that I have stuff laying around the kitchen that I need to use, and knowing about key ingredients, ratios, and having a trove of recipes that I trust to be good in their basic state to just pick through and advance makes eating at home a joyful experience for my partner and me. Salt your boiling pasta. Not a chef, but I've done lots of home and commercial cooking and had enough criticism compliments that I feel confident enough to post. Take your time. The pan doesn't need to be at maximum heat. The sizzle doesn't mean it's ready to flip, it means it's cooking. If it can simmer another minute, let it. I understand time sensitive dishes and being in a hurry, but nearly every dish I've ever cared to try or throw together or anything benefits from time and care. On the note of throwing things together, never be afraid to experiment, especially at home. It's fun, and folks that don't cook and will mistake an experimental move for the better as a stroke of genius on your part. Mise en place. Have all your stuff lined up and ready to go before you start. You don't want something to burn because you're busy looking for the tablespoon or opening a can of something. Also, read the recipe thoroughly first. Online ones especially. Many a time the instructions were unclear or the poster made a mistake. The only recipe that should have only 1 clove of garlic in it is a recipe for 1 clove of garlic. 2 minimum people. More seriously though, recipes which say 1 clove minced are looking to build a savory base, almost always on top of sauteed onions, not a garlic flavor. Not a chef, just Italian. Now, at last, I can rant on how to cook pasta. For the love of what's holy, wait for the water to reach boiling point before dumping the pasta in it, and remember to salt the water. Nobody likes eating starch glue. Furthermore, when making spaghetti, try to use a proper pot. It shouldn't be necessary to break the spaghetti in half in order to cook them. Wash your hands before starting. You have been visited by the money cat, like for good luck and fortune. Thanks for watching. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day, you magnificent people.